Hey guys, welcome back to another deep dive medieval bedtime story. Tonight we're going to explore the gritty, exhausting life of a medieval blacksmith. Before you get too comfortable under those cozy blankets, hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I want to know where you're listening from tonight, so drop a comment down below. Now dim those lights, grab your tea, and let's journey back in time. Before you get comfortable, know this: the life of a medieval blacksmith wasn't that romanticized image you've seen in movies. No muscular guy casually hammering away at a perfect sword while chatting with customers. No, the reality was a brutal existence of burns, injuries, and lung damage that would make modern OSHA inspectors faint on the spot. Tonight, you'll experience what it was truly like to be the person everyone in the village depended on, yet few truly appreciated. The reality check: medieval blacksmithing uncensored. When you think of a blacksmith, your mind probably conjures images from fantasy films. The wise, muscular craftsman hammering out legendary weapons, respected by all, a pillar of medieval society. And yes, blacksmiths were absolutely essential to medieval life, but not in the glamorous way Hollywood portrays them. The truth: medieval blacksmithing was a dangerous, backbreaking profession that often led to an early grave. While modern blacksmiths wear safety gear and work in well-ventilated spaces, you, as a medieval smith, would have none of these luxuries. Your workspace would be dimly lit by the orange glow of your forge, the air thick with coal dust that would gradually destroy your lungs over decades of service. Blacksmiths weren't just weapon makers either. That's another misconception. You'd be crafting everything from nails and horseshoes to agricultural tools, door hinges, and cooking utensils. You were the hardware store, the repairman, and the manufacturing plant, all rolled into one soot-covered package. So let's drop the fantasy and step into your worn leather shoes. It's time to experience a day in your life as the village blacksmith in 12th century England. Trust me, you wouldn't last a day. Your day begins dawn to dusk of iron and fire. Your day starts before the sun even thinks about rising. The roosters haven't crowed yet, but you're already awake. Your back aches from yesterday's 12 hours of hammering, and your hands are calloused beyond recognition. Those tiny burns from yesterday's sparks still sting under your rough woolen tunic. You roll out of your straw mattress, careful not to wake your wife and 3 children sleeping in the same room. Your home is attached to your workshop, a practical arrangement that keeps you close to your livelihood and allows you to check on slow-cooling projects during the night. The smell of iron, coal, and sweat has permanently embedded itself in the wooden walls of your humble dwelling. Your first task of the day isn't even smithing, it's lighting the forge. And this isn't as simple as flipping a switch. You need to get your forge to approximately 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit to work with iron properly, and that takes time and skill. You head to your workshop, where your apprentice should arrive within the hour. The kid is 14, the son of a local farmer who couldn't afford to feed all his children. He's been with you for 2 years now, and still manages to mess up the simplest tasks. But apprentices are cheap labor, and you need the help. Your forge is a stone structure with a hearth, above which hangs a crude chimney that does a mediocre job of ventilating the thick smoke. You gather kindling and small pieces of charcoal, arranging them carefully. Starting a forge isn't like starting a cooking fire. It requires precision. You use flint and steel to create sparks, catching them on dry tinder. Once you have a small flame, you gently blow on it, feeding it more fuel gradually. You pump the bellows, a large leather contraption that forces air into the forge, raising the temperature. Each push requires significant effort from your already tired arms. The bellows are the lungs of your operation, and you'll be working them throughout the day. Within an hour, your forge glows orange-red, finally hot enough to begin work. Your face is already slick with sweat, and you haven't even picked up a hammer yet. As dawn breaks, your apprentice stumbles in, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. You grunt a greeting and immediately put him to work pumping the bellows. The village reeve, an official who oversees local affairs, commissioned 5 dozen nails yesterday. The manor house needs repairs, and nails are a constant demand. They're also mind-numbingly boring to make, but they pay the bills. You grab an iron rod about the thickness of your thumb and thrust it into the hottest part of the forge. When it glows orange-yellow, you pull it out with tongs and move to your anvil, a 200-pound piece of iron that cost as much as a small house when your father bought it 30 years ago. This anvil is your most precious possession, and you'll eventually pass it down to your own son or a worthy apprentice. The rhythmic clanging begins. You hammer the rod, drawing it out into a thinner, longer piece. The noise is deafening, a constant soundtrack to your life that has already damaged your hearing. The village can always tell when the blacksmith is at work. Your hammer strikes ring out across the fields and houses like the heartbeat of the community. When the metal cools too much to work, becoming a dull red, you thrust it back into the forge. Your apprentice pumps the bellows harder, sweat pouring down his young face. This heating hammering cycle repeats countless times throughout the day. For nails, you need to create a point on one end while keeping the other end thick enough to form a head. After drawing out the metal to the right thickness, you use a chisel-like tool called a hardy, which fits into a hole in your anvil to cut the rod without severing it completely. You then break off the partial cut, leaving you with a piece of the right length for a nail. You hammer one end to a point, then place the nail in a nail header, essentially a metal plate with a hole in it. The unpointed end sticks up from the hole, and you hammer it down to create the nail's flat head. 1 nail down, 59 to go, and that's just the first job of the day. The brutal reality: your body is breaking down. As you hammer away, let's talk about what's happening to your body. Every strike sends a shock up your arm. Over years, this repetitive motion causes your joints to deteriorate. Most veteran blacksmiths suffer from debilitating arthritis by their 40s, if they live that long. Your posture is terrible, hunched over your work, straining your back and neck. But there's no medieval chiropractor to fix you up. You just live with the pain, perhaps dulling it with ale in the evening. Then there's the heat. Standing near Papasnura, a forge that reaches thousands of degrees, takes a toll on your body. You're constantly dehydrated, drinking water that's often contaminated with whatever parasites are making the rounds in your village this season. In winter, the extreme temperature difference between your forge and the freezing outdoors leads to frequent illnesses. Your lungs are slowly filling with coal dust and metal particles. Each breath brings in more contaminants. And that persistent cough you've developed isn't just a minor inconvenience, it's the sound of your respiratory system failing. Most blacksmiths develop what modern doctors would recognize as pneumoconiosis, black lung disease, similar to what coal miners suffer from. And that's not even mentioning the burns. Your forearms are a map of scars from flying sparks and accidental touches to hot metal. You've become so accustomed to minor burns that you barely notice them anymore. The more serious ones, though, those you remember, like the time 3 years ago when a piece of white-hot iron slipped from your tongs and landed on your foot. You still walk with a slight limp. Your hands have lost all sensitivity in places. The calluses are so thick you can barely feel gentle touches anymore. Your wife stopped holding your hand years ago. Your skin is rough as tree bark and constantly embedded with tiny metal splinters. Your eyes sting constantly from the smoke, and your vision has deteriorated from years of focusing on glowing metal in a dim workshop. The constant loud hammering has damaged your hearing, making conversations difficult, especially in your left ear, which is closer to the hammering action. Oh, and that lack of proper ventilation? The carbon monoxide from your forge gives you constant headaches and sometimes makes you dizzy. But you power through. What choice do you have? More than just metal. You're a medieval jack of all trades. By mid-morning, with a dozen nails completed, a farmer arrives at your workshop. His plow blade has hit a stone and bent badly. Spring planting starts soon, and without a functional plow, his family might starve come winter. This is an urgent job, so you set aside the nails. The plow blade is heavy, made of wrought iron, and requires significant strength just to manipulate. You heat it in the forge until it's malleable, then hammer it back into shape on your anvil. The work is punishing, the blade is unwieldy, and one wrong move could result in a crushed foot or a severe burn. This is the reality of your profession. You're constantly switching between tasks, prioritizing the most critical jobs for village survival. You're not just making pretty swords and armor, though you occasionally do. Most of your work involves repairing agricultural implements, making basic tools, and crafting the mundane metal objects that keep medieval life functioning. The farmer waits anxiously, knowing every moment his plow is unusable. Is time lost for planting? You work diligently, your experienced eye guiding each hammer blow. After 2 hours of intense labor, the plow blade is serviceable again. The farmer can't pay with money. Few peasants have actual coins, so he promises you a portion of his harvest come autumn. This is how most of your transactions work. A complex web of favors, trades, and promises that would mystify modern capitalists. As the farmer leaves, relieved, you return to your nail making. But you've barely picked up your hammer when the local priest appears. The church door hinges are squeaking so badly they disrupt prayers. Could you please fix them when you have a moment? And by when you have a moment, he means immediately, because the church waits for no one, not even the village blacksmith. You sigh and gather your portable tools. Your apprentice will continue making nails, hopefully without ruining too many, while you walk to the church. Medieval multitasking at its finest. Your social standing, respected but suspected. As you walk through the village with your toolkit, people nod respectfully. You hold an unusual position in medieval society, absolutely essential, yet slightly feared. Your ability to transform raw materials into useful objects seems almost magical to many villagers, and in a deeply superstitious time, anything approaching magical is viewed with both awe and suspicion. The fact that you work with a fire and create objects from seemingly nothing links you, in the medieval mind, to alchemical and sometimes demonic associations. In some regions, blacksmiths are thought to have healing powers or the ability to ward off evil. Other traditions suggest blacksmiths might be in league with dark forces. This duality affects your daily interactions. People respect your skills and depend on your services, but they might also cross themselves when passing your smoke-belching workshop. Children stare at your burned muscular arms with a mixture of fear and fascination. Your social standing is complicated further by your economic position. You're not wealthy by any stretch. The lord of the manor ensures no peasant accumulates too much, but you're better off than most agricultural workers. You have a specialized skill that guarantees you'll never starve, barring disaster. This places you firmly in the medieval middle class, such as it exists. You reach the church and examine the hinges. They're simple iron pieces you made yourself years ago, now worn from use and weather. You apply some animal fat as lubricant, the medieval version of WD-40, and make a mental note to forge new ones soon. The priest watches over your shoulder, making helpful suggestions that aren't helpful at all. You nod politely. Antagonizing the church is never wise, especially when they can influence how the entire village perceives you. Walking back to your workshop, you pass the manor house, where the Lord's steward spots you and waves you over. Just what you need. Another distraction from your pile of unfinished work. The steward informs you that the Lord will need new horseshoes before he leaves for a journey next week. It's not a request, it's an order. You bow your head respectfully while mentally rearranging your already overwhelming workload. Back to the anvil. Afternoon challenges. When you return to your workshop, you find your apprentice has managed to make 8 nails in your absence, 3 of which are actually usable. You suppress your frustration. You were worse when you started. Teaching is part of the job, ensuring your craft continues after your body eventually surrenders to the accumulated damage of decades of smithing. The afternoon brings new challenges. A hunter arrives with a broken crossbow trigger mechanism, a delicate piece requiring precision you can hardly achieve with your damaged hands and crude tools. But you're the only metal worker for miles, so you must try. You fashion a small temporary forge setup specifically for this delicate work, using charcoal rather than coal for a cleaner, more controlled heat. Working with small pieces requires intense concentration. Your eyes strain in the dim light as you carefully shape the tiny metal component. After several failed attempts and much cursed muttering, you produce a functional replacement part. The hunter is ecstatic. This means his family eats this week. He pays you with 2 rabbits, already skinned and ready for the pot. Your wife will be pleased. Meat isn't a daily occurrence in your diet. As you work through the afternoon, the temperature in your workshop becomes almost unbearable. Medieval forges had minimal ventilation, and summer days transform them into hellish environments. You're losing water through sweat faster than you can replace it, and heat stroke is a real possibility. Your apprentice looks ready to collapse. His young face red and dripping. You send him to the village well for water. When he returns, you both drink deeply before returning to work. No coffee breaks in medieval times. Just brief moments of respite between tasks. A woman from the village brings in a cooking pot with a hole in it. In a world where metal objects are expensive and precious, nothing gets thrown away if it can be repaired. You examine the pot and determine you can patch it. This requires a different technique. You'll need to create a small metal patch, then rivet or weld it over the hole. Medieval welding isn't like modern welding. You heat both pieces until they're white hot and nearly molten, then hammer them together, literally forcing the molecular structures to join. It's as much art as science, and your decades of experience guide your hands. The pot repair is successful, and the woman pays you with fresh bread her husband baked this morning. The smell makes your stomach growl. You suddenly realize you've barely eaten today. You break off a piece and share it with your apprentice. This is another aspect of medieval economy. The constant exchange of goods and services in a world where currency is scarce among common folk. The specialized work. When talent meets opportunity, while most of your days are filled with utilitarian items and repairs, occasionally you get to showcase your true skills. Today, as the afternoon wanes, an opportunity arrives in the form of a mounted soldier from the Lord's retinue. He needs repairs to his chainmail armor, where several links have broken. This is specialized work, the kind that reminds you why you endured a 7-year apprenticeship. Chainmail consists of thousands of interlocked metal rings, each one individually made and connected. Repairing it requires patience, precision, and expertise. You clear a clean workspace, a luxury in your soot-covered shop, and examine the damaged section. You'll need to create new links to replace the broken ones, then carefully weave them into the existing pattern. Each iron ring must be drawn from wire, cut, flattened at the ends, punched with holes, overlapped, and riveted closed. It's painstaking work that strains your eyes and tests your fingers' dexterity. The soldier waits impatiently. Unlike the villagers, he has actual silver coins to pay you, making this job worth prioritizing. Your apprentice watches closely. This is the skilled work he hopes to master someday, not just endless nails and hinges. As you work on the mail, you reflect on the irony of your profession. You create and repair the weapons and armor that lords use to maintain their power over common people like yourself. Yet without these same nobles' patronage and protection, your livelihood wouldn't exist. It's a complicated relationship that mirrors medieval society's interconnected hierarchies. After 2 hours of intense concentration, the mail is repaired. The soldier inspects your work with a critical eye before nodding with satisfaction. He pays you 2 silver pennies, more than you'd see in a month of the village work. You carefully store these actual coins in a hidden compartment under a loose floorboard. These will help pay your taxes and perhaps buy some luxuries at the next town fair. Evening approaches. Still more work to do. As evening approaches, you've only completed about half the nails the reeve commissioned, repaired a plow, fixed church door hinges, created a crossbow part, patched a cooking pot, and repaired chain mail. A full day by anyone's standards, yet your work isn't done. The fading light makes your workshop even dimmer. You light tallow candles, smelly, smoky things made from animal fat that provide just enough illumination to continue working. Nightsmithing is dangerous. The reduced visibility increases your chance of injury. But deadlines don't care about daylight. Your wife appears at the workshop door with a wooden bowl of pottage, a thick stew of whatever vegetables were available, with small pieces of your morning's bread floating in it. You eat standing up, unwilling to lose momentum. The hot food revives your energy somewhat, though your body screams for rest. Your apprentice, having worked since dawn, is swaying on his feet. You send him home. He lives with his family at the other end of the village. You'll finish the day's work alone, as you often do. The boy needs rest if he's to be of any use tomorrow. Now, alone in your workshop, you return to the nail making. The repetitive task allows your mind to wander, considering tomorrow's workload. The mill needs a new metal band for its grindstone. The carpenter requires specialized nails for a project at the manor house. 3 households need knives sharpened. The list never ends. Your hands move automatically, decades of muscle memory guiding each hammer stroke. The nails pile up slowly. Each one represents minutes of work, heating, hammering, cutting, shaping, finishing. Modern people would be shocked at how much effort goes into creating something they consider disposable. The hidden dangers. What's really killing you? As you work into the night, let's talk about what's really happening to your body. It's not just the obvious dangers of working with fire and hot metal that threaten your life as a medieval blacksmith. There's the metal dust you're inhaling. Every time you hammer hot iron, microscopic particles fly into the air. Some land on your skin and clothes, but many find their way into your lungs. Modern blacksmiths wear respirators. You have nothing. These particles accumulate over decades, scarring your lung tissue and gradually reducing your breathing capacity. Then there's the carbon monoxide from your forge. In your poorly ventilated workshop, this odorless gas builds up throughout the day. It gives you headaches and dizziness in the short term, but the long-term effects include heart damage and cognitive impairment. Many blacksmiths who appear to have died from old age were actually suffering from chronic carbon monoxide poisoning. The smoke itself contains numerous carcinogens. Cancer wasn't understood in medieval times, so when blacksmiths developed tumors more frequently than other villagers, it was attributed to bad luck or divine punishment rather than occupational exposure. Your ears suffer constant damage from the hammering. The ringing never really stops. Even when you're away from the forge, modern doctors would diagnose you with noise-induced hearing loss and tinnitus. The heat causes chronic dehydration, stressing your kidneys and cardiovascular system. Repetitive motion injures your joints, leading to debilitating arthritis. The heavy lifting, moving anvils, large pieces of metal, and crates of coal damages your spine. Burns are so common, you barely notice the minor ones anymore. But each burn, no matter how small, carries the risk of infection in an era without antibiotics. A tiny spark that lands on your arm today could be a life-threatening infection next week. Eye injuries are another constant threat. Tiny chips of hot metal fly off with each hammer strike. Without eye protection, many blacksmiths gradually lose their vision. The combination of flying debris and staring at bright, glowing metal for decades takes a severe toll on your eyesight. Then there are the catastrophic accidents. A heavy hammer that misses its mark and crushes a finger. A piece of hot metal that slips and falls onto a foot. An anvil that tips over during rearrangement, breaking bones, or worse. These aren't just possibilities. They're near certainties over a long career. The medieval blacksmith's life expectancy is significantly shorter than the already brief medieval average. Few smiths work past their 50th year, not because they retire, but because their bodies fail or accidents claim them. The late hours, when creativity happens. Despite all these dangers and discomforts, there's something almost magical about working in your shop late at night. The village is quiet, except for the rhythmic sound of your hammer. The forge's glow casts dancing shadows on the walls. This is when you do your best creative work. With the day's essential tasks nearly complete, you allow yourself an hour to work on a personal project, a decorative iron candle holder you've been designing for your wife's birthday. This is the side of blacksmithing rarely seen by customers. The artistic expression, the joy of creation for its own sake. You set aside the utilitarian mindset that governs your daylight hours and allow creativity to flow through your hammer. The metal seems to speak to you, suggesting forms and patterns as you work it. This isn't just technical skill. It's artistry passed down through generations of smiths. You carefully shape scroll work on the base of the candle holder, using techniques your master taught you decades ago. These decorative elements serve no practical purpose, yet they transform a simple object into something beautiful. In a life dominated by practical concerns and basic survival, these small acts of creation provide rare moments of aesthetic pleasure. This is the paradox of the medieval craftsman, trapped in a physically demanding, often dangerous profession, yet finding profound satisfaction in the act of creation. Your body may be breaking down, but in these quiet moments of focused creativity, your spirit soars. As you put the finishing touches on tonight's work on the candle holder, it will take several more sessions to complete. You realize how late it's grown. The tallow candles have burned low, and your family has been asleep for hours. Tomorrow will bring another dawn to dusk cycle of hard labor. Reluctantly, you bank the forge fire, carefully preserving the coals so they can be rekindled more easily in the morning. Your day is finally ending. Some 16 hours after it began, you wash as best you can in a bucket of cold water, scrubbing at the ingrained soot on your hands and face. It never comes completely clean, Blacksmiths' hands are always black to some degree. The coal dust becomes part of you, marking you as visibly as any brand or tattoo. The physical toll, your body at the end of the day. As you finally prepare for sleep, you take stock of your body's complaints. Your lower back throbs from hours of bending over the anvil. Your shoulder joints feel like they're filled with ground glass. Your hands are stiff, the fingers reluctant to straighten after gripping tools all day. Your eyes burn from smoke, and your throat feels raw. The persistent cough that's become your constant companion acts up again, producing dark phlegm. You try to suppress it, not wanting to wake your family, but the coughing fit takes a full minute to subside. You ease yourself onto your straw mattress beside your sleeping wife, trying not to groan audibly as your abused muscles protest the movement. She stirs slightly, used to your late arrivals. In the dim moonlight filtering through the small window, you can see your hands, enlarged knuckles, scarred skin, black lines of embedded coal dust that will never wash away. These are the hands of someone who has spent decades wrestling with fire and iron, and they tell your life story more eloquently than words ever could. Sleep doesn't come easily. Despite your exhaustion, your body is too stimulated from the day's labor. Your mind still racing with tomorrow's task list. When sleep finally claims you, it's a shallow, restless affair, punctuated by dreams of hammers and fire. You'll sleep for perhaps 5 or 6 hours before it all begins again. This is the rhythm of your life as a medieval blacksmith, a constant cycle of creation, destruction, and bodily sacrifice. Dawn breaks. Again, the cycle continues. Before you're ready, dawn arrives again. Your body protests as you rise from bed, joints stiff and painful. Years of this work have aged you beyond your actual years. At 40, you move like a man of 60. Your apprentice is already waiting outside. At least he's punctual today. Together, you begin the process of rekindling the forge, starting another day that will be remarkably similar to yesterday. The commissions pile up. The village needs its blacksmith. As you thrust the first piece of iron into the glowing coals, you reflect on your position. You're trapped in this profession, physically destroyed by it, yet utterly dependent on it. You can't stop or rest. Medieval society offers no retirement plan, no disability benefits. You work until you die or become so incapacitated that your apprentice must take over. Yet there's pride here too. Every tool in the fields, every knife in the kitchens, every nail in the buildings around you, these came from your hands. Your work makes all other work possible. Without the blacksmith, medieval society would collapse. Kings may rule, and priests may pray, but blacksmiths build the physical world that everyone inhabits. The day's first customer arrives. The cycle begins anew. So, yeah, you wouldn't last a day. So, yeah, that glamorized image of the blacksmith in films and fantasy books, pure fiction. The reality was a punishing existence of physical labor, constant health hazards, and enormous responsibility without adequate compensation. You, with your modern sensibilities, ergonomic concerns, and workplace safety expectations, wouldn't last a single day in a medieval forge. Your body would rebel against the heat the exertion, the toxic environment, your mind would crack under the pressure of knowing the entire community depends on your specialized skills. Yet these men and women did this work day after day, year after year, generation after generation. They quite literally forged civilization, creating the tools that built everything else. Their shortened lives and broken bodies were the price paid for humanity's material progress. Next time you see a historical blacksmithing demonstration at a Renaissance fair or living history museum, look beyond the romanticized presentation. See the reality of what this profession truly demanded from its practitioners. The medieval blacksmith's story isn't just about metal. It's about human endurance, sacrifice, and the foundations of the modern world we inherit. And maybe that's why we still talk about blacksmiths with such fascination today. In our world of disposable objects and automated production, there's something profound about a person who could create essential tools with nothing but fire, metal, and determination. The medieval blacksmith represents a direct connection between human effort and material result that most of us have lost in our specialized, digitized world. As you drift off to sleep tonight, comfortable in your modern bed, spare a thought for the medieval craftsmen whose hard, shortened lives helped build the foundations of our comfortable existence. Their hammers fell silent centuries ago, but the echoes of their work surround us still. Sleep well, and I'll be back tomorrow night with another unvarnished look at medieval. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments which medieval profession you'd like me to cover next. Sweet dreams from the darkest corners of history, the specialized tools of your trade. Before you fall asleep completely, let me tell you about the specialized tools that define your life as a blacksmith. These aren't just implements, they're extensions of your body, worn to match the contours of your hands through decades of use. Your hammer collection is your most personal possession. Unlike today's standardized tools, medieval blacksmiths crafted their own hammers to suit their specific needs and working style. You own at least a dozen different ones. Heavy sledgehammers for initial shaping, cross-peen hammers for spreading metal, straight peen hammers for controlled drawing out, and small ball peen hammers for delicate work. Each hammer handle is worn, smooth from your grip, the wood darkened with sweat and soot. The faces show patterns of wear that a fellow smith could identify as uniquely yours, like a signature in metal. Your tongs are equally personal and varied. You have dozens of pairs, each designed for holding specific shapes and sizes of metal. Some are for gripping flat stock, others for round bar, others still for awkwardly shaped pieces. You've made each pair yourself, customizing them for your hand size and working preferences. The anvil is the heart of your workshop, a massive piece of iron with a hardened steel face. Quality anvils were extremely expensive in medieval times, often passed down through generations of smiths. Your anvil has a personality. You know exactly how it responds to different types of hammer blows, which parts of its surface are best for which operations. Then, there are the specialized hardy tools that fit into the square hole in your anvil's surface. Cutters for slicing hot metal, bickerns for forming rings, swages for creating grooves and patterns. Each represents an expansion of your capabilities. a solution to specific forming challenges. Your punches and drifts allow you to create holes in hot metal, essential for everything from nail making to decorative scroll work. Files and rasps help with finishing work, though they're crude by modern standards. The slack tub, a barrel of water for quenching hot metal, sits within arm's reach of your anvil. This isn't just for cooling work in progress, it's your emergency burn treatment when things go wrong. Many smiths bear distinctive scarring on their arms from instinctively plunging them into the slack tub after a serious burn. Your forge itself is a tool of immense complexity. Despite its simple appearance, you've spent decades learning its moods, how it responds to different fuels, how the airflow affects temperature, which spots run hottest on which days. You can judge temperature by the color of the coals and the metal with remarkable precision, a skill no thermometer could replace. These tools represent an investment equivalent to a modern mortgage. The metal alone in your workshop would equate to several years' income for an average peasant. This is why blacksmithing often ran in families. The startup costs for a new smith without inherited tools were prohibitive. Each tool carries the weight of tradition. The basic design of blacksmithing tools remained remarkably consistent for over 1,000 years. Your hammer would be recognizable to a Roman smith, and many of your techniques would be familiar to metalworkers from ancient civilizations. As you finally drift toward sleep, your mind catalogs tomorrow's tool needs for each project. The physical tools may be extensions of your body, but the mental tools, the accumulated knowledge of working metal, are extensions of your mind, equally worn and specialized through decades of daily use. The secret knowledge, metallurgy, before science. There's another aspect of your profession that few outside the craft appreciate. You possess knowledge that seems almost magical to your contemporaries. Long before the scientific understanding of metallurgy, you work with principles discovered through centuries of trial and error, passed down through generations of smiths. You understand that different heating and cooling rates create different properties in iron. You know how to case harden the surface of soft iron by packing it in carbon-rich materials and heating it, creating a wear-resistant outer layer while maintaining a tough, flexible core. You can judge the carbon content of steel by how it sparks when ground against a stone. These aren't just techniques. They're a form of pre-scientific knowledge that predates formal understanding by centuries. When you heat iron to cherry red, before working it, you don't know about crystal structures and grain boundaries in the metal, but you understand empirically what happens if you hammer it when it's too cold or too hot. Your knowledge of metals extends beyond iron. You work with copper and its alloys, brass and bronze, for projects where iron isn't suitable. Each metal has its own personality, its own requirements and limitations that you've learned through experience and the collective wisdom of your craft. You know which woods burn hottest and cleanest in your forge, which stones resist heat cracking for forge construction, which clays make the best crucibles for melting small amounts of precious metals. You understand how to make flux from wood ash to help with welding and soldering. This knowledge isn't written in books. It exists in your hands, in the subtle adjustments you make to your technique based on conditions you can barely articulate. Modern engineers would call this tacit knowledge, expertise that defies complete verbal description. Your position as keeper of these metallurgical secrets gives you a unique status. When farmers discuss crop rotation or masons debate building techniques, they're practicing crafts that many can observe and understand at a basic level. But your work with metal transformation remains mysterious to most, verging on alchemical. In the medieval mind, some of your knowledge does border on alchemy, the predecessor to chemistry. You might mix copper and zinc to create brass without fully understanding the chemical processes involved. You might add specific minerals to your forge to achieve certain effects in the metal based on generational wisdom rather than chemical formulas. This knowledge isn't static. You're constantly experimenting, refining techniques, solving new problems. Each difficult repair teaches you something. Each failure, and there are many, adds to your understanding. By the end of your career, you'll possess a body of practical metallurgical knowledge that exceeds what's written in any contemporary text. And this may be the greatest tragedy of the medieval craftsman's life. Much of this hard-won knowledge dies with each smith. In a world without systematic scientific documentation, the subtle expertise, the feeling for metal, that can only be developed through decades of daily work, is partially lost with each passing generation, preserved only in the imperfect transmission from master to apprentice. As a modern person falling asleep to this story, consider this. You live in a world built on documented, systematized knowledge that allows each generation to stand on the shoulders of giants. The medieval blacksmith stood mainly on their own, calloused feet, backed only by oral tradition and personal experience. The wonder isn't that medieval technology was limited, it's that they accomplished so much with so little. The economics of fire and iron. Let's talk about money, or rather, the complex economic web you navigate as a medieval blacksmith. In a world where actual coins are scarce among common people, your business operates largely through barter and credit. You rarely get paid in cash for your work. Instead, you receive payment in goods and services, a portion of a farmer's harvest, fresh bread from the baker, meat from the butcher, labor from the thatcher when your roof needs repair. These transactions aren't recorded in ledgers, but tracked through mutual obligation and community memory. Your pricing isn't standardized either. What you charge depends on who's asking and their relationship to you. The local lord pays differently, usually less, relative to the work involved, than the village priest, who pays differently than your farmer neighbor. Social hierarchies dictate economic relationships as much as market forces. When you do receive actual coins, typically from nobles, merchants, or the church, you save them carefully. These will pay your taxes, purchase raw materials that can't be bartered for, and perhaps buy small luxuries at the annual fair. Metal currency represents your economic flexibility in a way that perishable goods don't. Your most significant expense is iron itself. Contrary to popular belief, you don't mine or smelt ore yourself. That's an entirely different profession. You purchase bloom iron, a semi-refined product that still contains significant slag from specialized producers. This raw material costs you dearly, which is why nothing metal gets thrown away in your shop. Every scrap is recycled. Coal or charcoal for your forge represents another major expense. You might burn through a substantial pile each week, requiring regular deliveries from charcoal burners. In some regions, coal is becoming more common for smithing, but it produces more sulfur, potentially damaging certain iron pieces. Then there's the matter of your taxes and obligations. As a craftsman, rather than an agricultural worker, you have a somewhat different relationship with the feudal power structure. You likely pay a combination of money taxes and in-kind services, creating specialized metal objects for the lord's household as part of your feudal obligations. Your workshop itself represents a significant investment. If you own rather than rent the property, and many established smiths did own their workshops, it probably took years to save enough to purchase it. If you rent, that's an ongoing expense that takes priority over almost everything else. Apprentices present an interesting economic equation. They provide labor, initially unskilled, but increasingly valuable as they learn. In exchange, you provide training, food, sometimes lodging, and often a small stipend. In the early years, they cost you more than they contribute, but a good third or fourth year apprentice becomes genuinely valuable to your operation. One aspect of medieval economics that modern people might find surprising is the regulation of your trade. In many European towns, by the late medieval period, blacksmiths belonged to guilds that strictly controlled prices, quality standards, and who could practice the trade. These organizations functioned as a combination of professional association, quality control system, and social club. Even in villages too small for formal guild structures, unwritten rules governed what you could charge and what constituted acceptable work. Reputation was everything in a community where you'd serve the same customers for decades. One poorly made tool could damage your standing for years. This economic reality shapes your daily decisions. You carefully balance the needs of powerful patrons against fair treatment of poorer customers. You scrupulously track who owes you what, even without written records. You think constantly about material conservation, using precisely the amount of valuable metal needed for each job, no more and no less. As you lay in bed, calculating tomorrow's material needs against your current stock, you're engaging in the same complex economic planning that keeps your business functioning year after year in a volatile, unpredictable economy without banks, insurance, or consistent currency. The family business, your support system, your blacksmithing operation isn't a solo endeavor. It's a family business. Your wife plays an essential role, though her contributions often go unrecognized in historical accounts. While you hammer at the forge, your wife might manage the front of house operations, dealing with customers, negotiating prices and timelines, keeping mental records of who has paid and who still owes. In many blacksmith households, wives became accomplished businesswomen by necessity, handling all the non-technical aspects of the operation. She likely also maintains a kitchen garden, and perhaps tends small livestock, supplementing your income and providing food for your family and apprentices. This agricultural sideline is crucial. Even a successful craftsman can't afford to purchase all his food in medieval economies. Your children become involved in the business from an early age. By 5 or 6, your sons and daughters are helping with simple tasks: pumping bellows, sorting finished nails, fetching tools. By their early teens, they're taking on more sophisticated roles. Your eldest son is learning the craft directly, positioned to take over the business eventually. Your daughters may assist with customer interactions or do filing and finishing work. This family involvement isn't just economically necessary, it's how technical knowledge transfers between generations. The traditional image of the solitary blacksmith is largely a myth. Medieval workshops were family operations, with knowledge passed down not just from father to son, but often through wider family networks, including uncles, cousins, and sometimes daughters when sons weren't available. Marriage itself often served business purposes in medieval craft communities. A blacksmith's son might marry a coal supplier's daughter, creating a valuable business alliance, or a smith without sons might encourage his daughter to marry a promising apprentice, keeping the valuable tools and workshop within the family. Your ancestors likely worked metal for generations, the family profession passing down along with the tools and techniques. Your grandfather might have hammered iron in this very spot, perhaps even used the same anvil you work on daily. This multi-generational continuity created dynasties of smiths in many communities, family names becoming synonymous with the craft. When you eventually become too old or infirm to swing a hammer effectively, you won't simply retire. Instead, you'll gradually shift to an advisory role, guiding your son or son-in-law while they take on the physically demanding aspects of the business. You'll still be present in the workshop daily, your experience compensating for your diminished strength. This family-centered approach to business creates both security and obligation. You're never alone in your work, but you also bear the responsibility of supporting multiple generations. A serious injury doesn't just threaten you, it endangers your entire family's livelihood. As you finally drift toward sleep, the weight of this responsibility presses on you as heavily as the day's physical exertions. Tomorrow, you'll rise again, not just because your body and craft demand it, but because your family depends on your bent back and scarred hands. The annual rhythm, seasons of a smith. While the basic tasks of heating and hammering remain constant year-round, your work as a blacksmith follows distinct seasonal patterns that shape your annual experience. Spring brings a rush of agricultural repairs. Farmers crowd your workshop with plowshares that need straightening or resharpening after hitting stones in newly thawed fields. Harrow tines require replacement, pruning shears need sharpening, and 100 other farming implements demand attention before the growing season gains full momentum. These weeks are some of your busiest, with dawn to dusk work leaving little time for meals or rest. Summer sees a shift toward construction projects. The good building weather means new structures going up, requiring hinges, nails, latches, and other architectural ironwork. Traveling merchants pass through more frequently during the favorable summer travel months, sometimes bringing new iron stock or exotic materials from distant regions. You might adjust your production schedule to create inventory for harvest time. Fairs, crafting smaller items like buckles, knives, and decorative pieces that can be sold directly to consumers. Autumn brings harvest tool maintenance. Sickles and scythes require careful sharpening to function efficiently during the critical harvest period. Once crops are in, farmers finally have products to trade, meaning your outstanding debts often get settled during this season. The pre-winter rush also begins, with villagers preparing for the cold months by commissioning cooking tools, fire irons, and repairs to items they'll rely on when travel becomes difficult. Winter offers a different rhythm. With fields dormant and construction minimal, your agricultural and building-related work decreases. Weather often confines people to their homes, reducing your walk-in business. However, these quieter months allow you to focus on more complex, time-consuming projects, decorative work, specialized tools, or pieces requiring intricate detail that would be impossible during the frantic pace of spring and summer. Winter also presents unique challenges. Your workshop, relatively comfortable during summer's heat, thanks to good ventilation, becomes bitterly cold just steps away from the forge. The constant temperature swings as you move between the fire and cold areas stress your body further. Iron becomes more brittle in extreme cold, requiring adjustments to your working techniques. Coal or charcoal deliveries might be delayed by snow, forcing you to carefully ration your fuel. Throughout all seasons, certain fixed points anchor your year. Religious festivals often involve processional items, church decorations, or specialized tools for ceremonies, creating predictable annual commissions. Local fairs and markets provide opportunities to sell directly to consumers rather than working on commission. Tax collection periods require careful financial planning to ensure you have either the coin or the bartered goods to meet your obligations. This seasonal rhythm creates a complex annual cycle of feast and famine, both in terms of workload and income. The medieval blacksmith must carefully manage resources through these fluctuations, saving surplus from busy periods to weather the inevitable slow times. The technology gap. What you don't have. As you work with your medieval tools, it's worth considering what you don't have. The technological advances that separate your experience from that of a modern blacksmith. You have no precision measuring tools. Modern smiths use calipers, micrometers, and laser levels to achieve exact specifications. You rely entirely on your eye, comparing pieces directly or using simple wooden gauges you've created yourself. About the width of my thumb is a legitimate measurement in your workshop. You have no consistent power source. Every bit of energy used to shape metal comes directly from human muscle, yours or your apprentice's. The trip hammer, powered by water wheel, exists in some regions but isn't widely available yet. The consistent, tireless power of electric motors or hydraulic presses remains centuries away. You have no predictable, controllable heat. Modern smiths use propane forges, electric heat treating ovens, and pyrometers to achieve specific, consistent temperatures. You judge heat entirely by color and behavior of the metal. Your iron varies dramatically in carbon content, impurities, and quality depending on its source, the smelting process used, and dozens of other variables. Each new batch of metal requires testing and familiarization. You have no chemical knowledge. Modern smiths understand oxidation, carburization, and phase transformations at the molecular level. You have empirical knowledge. Do this, and that happens, without understanding why. Your quenching oil might be specifically formulated for optimal hardening. Yours is whatever animal fat you have available. You have no safety equipment, no welding goggles to protect your eyes, no respirators to filter smoke and metal dust, no ear protection against the constant hammering. Modern smiths wrap themselves in protective gear before approaching their forges. You work with bare hands and minimal clothing due to the heat. You have no reference materials, no books containing standardized techniques, no online forums where you can ask questions when facing a challenging project. Your only resources are your own experience and whatever knowledge has been verbally passed down through your apprenticeship. You have no specialized materials, no high-carbon tool steel perfectly formulated for edge retention, no stainless alloys that resist corrosion, no tungsten carbide for unparalleled hardness. You work primarily with wrought iron and crude steel, making the best of their limitations. You have no artificial light. Modern workshops are brilliantly illuminated, allowing precision work at any hour. You rely on sunlight through small windows and the dim glow of your forge, supplemented by expensive tallow candles or oil lamps when necessary. These technological limitations don't just make your work harder, they fundamentally change its nature. The medieval blacksmith isn't simply a modern craftsperson without power tools. You're operating within an entirely different technological paradigm. The fact that you can produce functional, sometimes beautiful items despite these limitations testifies to the ingenuity and skill of pre-industrial craftspeople. The social web, your community role. Beyond the economic and technical aspects of your trade, being a blacksmith places you in a unique social position within your medieval community. Your workshop functions as more than just a production space. It's a social hub where information exchanges hands as readily as metal objects. Farmers waiting for repairs discuss crop conditions and weather patterns. Travelers stopping for horseshoes share news from other villages and towns. The Lord's servants, picking up commissioned pieces, drop hints about activities at the manor house. In many ways, your workshop serves as an unofficial gathering place, second only to the tavern and church in community importance. Your position grants you unusual social mobility. You interact directly with all levels of medieval society, from peasant farmers to occasionally the Lord himself. Few other commoners have such vertical range in their social contacts. This doesn't make you equal to your social betters. Rigid hierarchies remain firmly in place, but it does give you a unique perspective on your community's full spectrum. You're also privy to secrets and sensitive information. When a farmer orders unusual equipment, you might realize he's planning to clear new land without permission. When the Lord commissions decorative pieces, you might deduce a noble visitor is expected. A sudden demand for weapons or defensive items might indicate trouble brewing before it becomes common knowledge. This position comes with responsibilities. You're expected to maintain confidentiality when appropriate. You must delicately balance competing interests when multiple customers have urgent needs. You serve as an informal mediator in disputes, especially those involving metal objects or mechanical questions where your expertise lends authority. In many villages, the blacksmith takes on semi-official roles beyond metalworking. You might extract teeth, the iron tools of your trade being the closest thing to dental equipment available. You might serve as a veterinary consultant, particularly for horses, whose shoes you regularly handle. In some regions, blacksmiths even performed emergency surgical procedures. When no other options existed, superstition surrounds your profession, creating another social dimension. In many European traditions, blacksmiths were believed to have healing powers, particularly for ailments like whooping cough or sprains. People might bring sick children to touch your anvil or pass underneath it as a folk remedy. The association between smiths and folk magic persisted well into the Christian era, creating a sometimes uneasy relationship with church authorities. Your marriage prospects are shaped by your profession as well. As a skilled craftsman with steady income, you're considered a desirable match, despite the physical toll and shortened lifespan associated with your trade. Your wife likely came from another craft family of similar social standing. The marriage, creating business connections, as well as a personal partnership. Even your clothing and physical appearance mark your social role. Your forearms are distinctively muscled, your hands permanently darkened with embedded coal dust. You likely wear a leather apron outside your workshop as a badge of professional identity. People can identify your trade at a glance, your body itself becoming a symbol of your function in the community. This complex social positioning, essential yet sometimes feared, respected yet physically marked as different, creates a unique identity. The medieval blacksmith isn't just defined by technical skills, but by this multifaceted community role that touches nearly every aspect of village life. The innovation paradox, creativity within constraints. One of the most fascinating aspects of your life as a medieval blacksmith is the tension between tradition and innovation. Popular imagination often portrays pre-industrial craftspeople as mindlessly reproducing the same designs for generations. But the reality is far more complex. You face constant pressure to innovate, but within extremely tight constraints. When a farmer brings you a broken tool with a design flaw that causes repeated failures, you need to devise improvements using only the materials and techniques available to you. When a new agricultural practice requires specialized equipment, you must create it without the benefit of engineering drawings or prototypes. This innovation occurs through an iterative, experimental process. You might try 3 different designs for a plow blade, testing each through a season before determining which performs best in local soil conditions. Unlike modern engineers with their computer simulations and rapid prototyping, your R&D cycle might span years, with failed experiments representing significant investments of time and precious materials. Your innovations are rarely documented and primarily spread through direct observation and apprenticeship networks. If you develop a superior technique for tempering scythe blades, it might remain exclusive to your workshop for years before gradually spreading to neighboring communities. As apprentices establish their own shops or other smiths observe your work at regional gatherings, this system creates innovation islands, techniques or designs that evolve specifically in one region based on local needs and materials, sometimes remaining isolated for generations. The specific way you forge a particular agricultural tool might be distinctly different from how it's made just 30 miles away, each variation adapted to local agricultural practices and soil conditions. The constraints you work within actually drive creativity rather than limiting it. With finite resources and specifications that must be met, you're forced to find ingenious solutions that maximize efficiency and functionality. Modern designers call this constraint-driven innovation. You simply call it survival. Religious and cultural factors also shape your innovative processes. Certain traditional designs might carry symbolic significance that must be maintained even when functionally obsolete. Guild regulations, where they exist, might dictate specific techniques or features required in certain products, limiting your freedom to experiment. The pace of innovation in medieval crafts was far slower than in our modern world, but it was steady and relentless. Each generation of smiths added incremental improvements to tools and techniques, gradually refining designs over centuries. The plow you forge is subtly but meaningfully different from what your grandfather created, incorporating dozens of small improvements accumulated over decades. This slow evolution of design reflects the fundamental medieval relationship with time. Without the modern obsession with rapid progress and disruption, innovation flows at the pace of human lives and generational knowledge transfer. Techniques are perfected rather than replaced, refined rather than revolutionized. As you fall asleep, thinking about modifications to a tool design that's been bothering you, you're participating in this ancient dance of incremental innovation, the patient, persistent improvement that characterized technological development for most of human history. The guild system, Brotherhood of the Hammer. By the later medieval period in many European regions, your work as a blacksmith would increasingly be regulated by the guild system, a complex social, economic, and political organization that profoundly shaped craft practice. If you lived in or near a substantial town, you would likely belong to the Blacksmiths Guild, perhaps combined with related metal workers like locksmiths or armorers in smaller communities. These organizations served multiple functions that defined your professional existence. The guild controlled who could practice your trade. The traditional progression from apprentice to journeyman to master was strictly regulated with specific requirements for each transition. An apprenticeship might legally require 7 years before the apprentice could advance, regardless of actual skill development. Becoming a master with your own shop required creating a masterpiece, a demonstration object proving your technical capabilities. For review by established masters, this system created artificial scarcity, limiting competition by restricting the number of practitioners. In many towns, the guild might specify exactly how many blacksmith workshops could operate, preventing market saturation that would drive down prices. To open a new shop, you might need to wait for an existing master to die or retire. The guild also standardized pricing, product specifications, and quality standards. Price cutting could result in fines or expulsion, as could delivering substandard work. These regulations protected both consumers and practitioners, ensuring stable incomes for smiths while guaranteeing customers received fair value. Beyond these economic functions, the guild provided social services that would otherwise be unavailable. Guild funds often supported members during illness or injury, helped widows and orphans of deceased smiths, and provided funeral expenses in an era before insurance or government safety nets. This mutual aid function was crucial for managing the considerable physical risks of your profession. The guild hall served as both administrative center and social club. Regular meetings combined business discussions with feasting and drinking, cementing the bonds between practitioners. Many guilds had religious aspects as well, with patron saints, Saint Eligius for metalworkers, and participation in religious processions and festivals as a unified group. Politically, guilds wielded significant influence in town governance. In many European cities, guildmasters held seats on town councils and shaped local regulations. The collective economic power of organized craftsmen allowed them to negotiate with nobles and church authorities from a position of relative strength. For you, as an individual blacksmith, guild membership offered security and identity at the cost of some autonomy. The regulations might prevent you from developing certain innovative techniques or entering new markets, but they also protected you from ruinous competition and provided a safety net unavailable to ungilded workers. The relationship between rural village smiths and urban guilds varied by region and period. In some areas, even isolated rural practitioners fell under guild jurisdiction. In others, country smiths operated independently, while city-based smiths faced strict regulation. This created different economic landscapes for metalworkers depending on their location. The guild structure represented yet another layer of complexity in your professional identity. Beyond the technical, economic, and social dimensions of your craft, you were part of an ancient brotherhood with its own traditions, politics, and collective interests. The technological frontier, medieval innovation in metalworking. Despite the constraints and traditionalism of medieval society, your era witnessed significant innovations in metalworking technology that transformed what was possible in your craft. The High Medieval period, roughly 1300 CE, saw the increasing adoption of water power for metalworking applications. Water-powered trip hammers, massive mechanical hammers raised by a water wheel and dropped onto metal, began to appear in larger operations. These devices, though rare and expensive, could perform heavy forging operations that would require multiple human workers, increasing production capacity for large-scale metals projects. The blast furnace began its slow spread across Europe, revolutionizing iron production. Unlike the bloomery furnaces that produced relatively small amounts of wrought iron directly, blast furnaces could produce cast iron in larger quantities. This material, brittle but excellent for casting, expanded the possibilities for certain applications while requiring new techniques to work effectively. Specialized alloys became more sophisticated throughout the medieval period. While you didn't understand the chemistry involved, empirical knowledge about mixing metals to achieve specific properties grew steadily. Bronze and brass casting techniques reached high levels of refinement, particularly for church bells and decorative objects. Drawing mills for creating wire appeared in some regions by the late medieval period. These devices, initially hand-powered but later water-driven, could produce wire of consistent diameter more efficiently than hand-drawing techniques. Wire production might seem mundane, but it was essential for everything from chainmail to musical instruments. In tool design, the medieval period saw continuous refinement of edge-holding capabilities in steel. Through trial and error, smiths developed complex heat-treating sequences that optimized the performance of cutting tools. Despite having no understanding of the microstructural changes happening within the metal, pattern welding techniques, folding, and forge welding layers of iron with different carbon contents created blades with combinations of hardness and flexibility impossible in homogeneous metals. These techniques produced both functional improvements and distinctive visual patterns that became prized aesthetic features. Metalworking specialization increased dramatically throughout the period. While early medieval smiths were often generalists by necessity, by the late medieval era, urban centers supported highly specialized metalworkers, armorers, weaponsmiths, lockmakers, bell founders, and many others. This specialization allowed for greater technical sophistication within each niche. Crucible steel, produced by melting iron with specific additives in clay crucibles, began appearing through trade networks with the Islamic world and, to a lesser extent, through local experimentation. This higher quality material enabled more sophisticated tools and weapons when available, though it remained relatively rare in most of Europe. As a working smith, your interaction with these innovations would depend greatly on your location, connections, and economic standing. A village blacksmith might hear rumors of these developments without directly experiencing them, while a smith in a major urban center or attached to a large monastic complex might have access to the latest techniques and materials. These technological developments didn't happen in regular, predictable stages, as modern innovation often appears to. Instead, they diffused unevenly across regions, sometimes being adopted, abandoned, and later rediscovered in complex patterns, influenced by political stability, trade networks, and local resources. The medieval period, far from being technologically stagnant, laid essential groundwork for the metallurgical advances that would enable the later Industrial Revolution. As a blacksmith in this era, you were part of this long chain of incremental innovation, even if the individual links weren't always visible from your workshop. The spiritual dimension, faith at the forge, beyond the physical and economic aspects of your work, blacksmithing in medieval Europe carried profound spiritual and symbolic dimensions that colored your experience and identity. Christian symbolism permeated metalworking practices, Many smiths began their workday with prayers or made the sign of the cross before lighting the forge. Saint Eligius, also known as Saint Eloi or Eloi, the patron saint of blacksmiths and metal workers, watched over your labors from a small shrine in the corner of your workshop. On his feast day, December 1st, you might participate in special church services, followed by guild celebrations. The transformative nature of your work, turning raw materials into refined objects through fire, carried obvious, symbolic parallels to spiritual transformation. Christian theology often employed blacksmithing metaphors, souls refined by the fire of testing, hammered into shape by divine guidance. This gave your daily labor a spiritual dimension that transcended mere economic activity. Yet your profession also carried older, pre-Christian associations that never entirely disappeared. In many European folk traditions, smiths held quasi-magical status. Norse mythology venerated Wayland the smith. Greek traditions honored Hephaestus. These ancient connections between metalworking and supernatural power lingered in popular imagination, sometimes creating tension with Christian authorities. Fire itself, your primary working element, carried powerful symbolic weight in medieval cosmology. Seen as both purifying and destructive, the controlled fire of your forge represented humanity's tenuous mastery over primal elements. Working daily with this transformative force set you apart from those who labored with more stable materials like wood or stone. Your position between the material and spiritual worlds manifested in community practices. In many regions, the blacksmith's anvil held special power. New brides might circle it for fertility. Children passed beneath it for protection from disease. Oaths sworn upon it were considered especially binding. These customs reflected your unique status as a transformer of elemental materials. The mysterious knowledge of metallurgy reinforced these spiritual associations. Your ability to assess the carbon content of steel by its spark pattern or determine proper tempering heat by color seemed magical to those without your training. The dramatic visual elements of your craft, the glowing metal, the shower of sparks, the transformation of solid to liquid and back, even your tools carried symbolic significance. The hammer and anvil appeared in religious iconography, sometimes representing the forging of faith or the shaping of character through adversity. Church bells, cast by specialized metal workers, marked sacred time and space throughout medieval communities. Their creation surrounded by rituals and blessings. The spiritual aspect of your craft wasn't separate from its practical dimensions. The two were inextricably linked in the medieval mindset. When you crafted a fine blade or decorative piece, its beauty wasn't merely aesthetic, but reflected divine harmony expressed through human skill. Craftsmanship itself was a form of devotion, a way of honoring creation through mindful participation in it. This spiritual dimension provided meaning beyond economic necessity. On days when your back ached unbearably and your lungs burned from forge smoke, the sense that your work participated in something greater than yourself offered a form of solace unavailable in purely transactional approaches to labor. The legacy of the smith, what survives. As our journey through your life as a medieval blacksmith comes to an end, let's consider what remains of your life's work centuries later. Most of the items you created have long since returned to rust. The thousands of nails, hinges, locks, and tools you forged with such care have disintegrated, their molecules returning to the earth or recycled into other objects by later smiths. The nature of iron, its tendency to oxidize back to its natural state, means that without constant maintenance, your creations were always fighting a battle against time. Yet some pieces do survive in museums and private collections around the world. Examples of medieval ironwork still exist, often the most significant or decorative pieces that received exceptional care. Church door hinges with elaborate scrollwork, ceremonial grills protecting sacred spaces, ornate locks, and keys for important buildings. These special commissions sometimes survived when everyday items perished. Archaeological excavations regularly uncover fragments of more mundane items: horseshoes, knife blades, agricultural tool pieces preserved in unique soil conditions. These humble objects provide windows into medieval technological capabilities and daily life, studied by specialists who can read the technical evidence of your craft methods from these remnants. Historic buildings preserve some of the most spectacular examples of medieval ironwork. Cathedral doors still swing on hinges, forged 800 years ago. Decorative railings continue to serve their protective function centuries after installation. These surviving pieces demonstrate the remarkable durability of well-made iron objects when properly maintained. Beyond the physical objects themselves, your cultural and technological legacy survives in numerous forms. The basic techniques you employed, heating, hammering, drawing out, forge welding, remain fundamentally unchanged in modern hand blacksmithing. Today's craftspeople, using traditional methods, would recognize your basic toolkit and could step up to your anvil with minimal adaptation. The organizational structures you participated in evolved into modern institutions. Medieval guilds eventually transformed into trade unions and professional associations. Apprenticeship systems, though modified, continue to play important roles in skilled trades education. The technological innovations developed through centuries of collective blacksmithing experimentation laid essential groundwork for the Industrial Revolution. The empirical understanding of metals, developed in medieval forges, enabled later scientific metallurgy. Water-powered hammers evolved into steam hammers, and eventually hydraulic presses. Even the language we use carries echoes of your profession. We forge ahead when making progress, strike while the iron is hot when seizing opportunities, and describe genuine items as the real McCoy, possibly named after a skilled blacksmith whose work couldn't be duplicated. These linguistic fossils preserve the cultural importance of your craft. Most profoundly, your approach to problem solving, the iterative improvement of designs through practical testing, the development of specialized tools for specific challenges, the careful conservation of precious resources represents a technological philosophy that remains relevant despite our radical change in capabilities. As a modern person drifting off to sleep after this immersive journey, consider that the mundane objects surrounding you, the metal fixtures, tools, and components that make modern life possible, all trace their lineage to the smoky medieval forge. Your comfortable life rests on foundations laid by countless anonymous craftspeople whose scarred hands shaped our material world nail by nail, hammer, blow by hammer blow. The medieval blacksmith's legacy isn't just in museums or history books, it's in the fundamental relationship between humans and the materials we shape to serve our needs. The specific techniques have evolved, but the essential dialogue between maker and metal continues unbroken from your medieval workshop to today's advanced manufacturing facilities. Sleep well, knowing that the anonymous craftspeople who shaped history with burning lungs and calloused hands haven't been forgotten. Their ingenuity, endurance, and skill echo through time, hammered into the very structure of our modern world. Final thoughts. The enduring forge. As you drift into sleep, one final reflection on why the medieval blacksmith continues to capture our imagination so powerfully. In our digital age of mass production and disposable goods, there's something profoundly appealing about the direct connection between effort and result found in the blacksmith's craft. When you forged a tool, your personal skill and judgment were directly visible in the finished product. Your individual hands shaped objects that served specific people in your community. This connection, maker to object to user, represents a relationship with material goods that many modern people hunger for. The physical nature of the work, though destructive to the body, offered a clarity of purpose often missing in contemporary occupations. At day's end, you could see what you'd accomplished: the pile of finished nails, the repaired plow, the new door hinges ready for installation. This tangible productivity provided immediate feedback and satisfaction despite the harsh conditions. Perhaps most significantly, the medieval blacksmith embodies self-reliance and problem-solving of a kind rarely needed in specialized modern life. You couldn't call technical support or order replacement parts. You had to devise solutions using available materials and your own ingenuity. This comprehensive mastery over your material domain represents a form of freedom and capability increasingly rare in our interdependent world. The aesthetic of the forge, the elemental combination of fire, metal, and human strength, speaks to something primal in the human experience. The visual drama of transformation through fire connects us to our earliest ancestors who first discovered the power of metallurgy. When we watch modern demonstrations of traditional blacksmithing, we're witnessing processes essentially unchanged for thousands of years. As you finally succumb to sleep, consider that your journey through a medieval smith's life isn't just historical tourism. It's a reconnection with foundational human experiences of making, serving, enduring, and creating that transcend their specific historical context. The medieval blacksmith's story continues to resonate because it embodies timeless aspects of the human relationship with materials and community that remain relevant despite the centuries that separate us. Sleep well, and perhaps dream of the forge, not with romanticized nostalgia, but with nuanced appreciation for those whose difficult labor helped build the foundations of our modern world. Their hammers fell silent long ago, but the echoes continue to shape how we understand craftsmanship, technology, and the dignity of skilled work. Thank you for joining me on this journey through medieval craftsmanship. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which medieval profession you'd like to explore next time. Until then, sweet dreams from the darkest corners of history, the unwritten rules, ethics of the forge. Even in an age before formalized business, ethics, or corporate codes of conduct, your trade as a medieval blacksmith was governed by a surprisingly complex web of unwritten moral expectations. These ethical norms weren't etched into law, but were deeply felt, passed through generations of craftsmen like the techniques themselves. First and foremost was the expectation of honesty in your materials. Passing off a brittle, poorly tempered blade as battle ready could mean death for a soldier in the field. Using inferior iron in farming tools might doom an entire harvest. You knew that cutting corners with materials could have consequences far beyond mere reputation. In a world where survival teetered on the edge of functionality, the reliability of your work could quite literally be a matter of life or death. Then there was pricing. Sure, you could overcharge the widow who needed a cooking hook, or the sick farmer who required a new hoe blade. But the village would remember, reputation wasn't about marketing slogans. It was your only currency. One act of greed or deception could ripple through the community for months, even years. You didn't just serve a customer, you maintained a social contract. And when something you made broke, if it failed prematurely or due to your own oversight, it wasn't uncommon to fix or replace it for free. You didn't have a formal warranty policy, but your sense of professional pride demanded accountability. Not to mention, having to walk past your own defective craftsmanship every day in a village with no anonymity was a daily humiliation you tried to avoid at all costs. There were also ethical lines you tried not to cross when it came to commissions. Making weapons was part of your job, sure, but when a known troublemaker asked you to forge a dagger with suspicious urgency, or a rival lord's servant came seeking armor late at night, you were forced into uncomfortable moral calculations. Refuse, and you risked angering powerful people. Accept, and you might arm someone who'd later return to harm your own community. You walked a tightrope. Every piece you crafted had implications beyond the workshop walls, and the older you got, the more you understood the weight of every hammer blow, not just in the metal, but in the lives around you. So yeah, you weren't just a tradesman, you were an unspoken guardian of community trust. The apprentice's path, from boy to blacksmith. Now let's shift perspective for a moment. Imagine you're not the master in the forge, but the boy in the corner, the apprentice. Barely a teenager, barely educated, and certainly not prepared for the grueling path ahead. Your hands are soft, your back unused to labor, and your mind still half in childhood. But your family can't afford to feed all their children, and this apprenticeship is your ticket to survival, maybe even eventual independence. Your first year is mostly humiliation. You're tasked with cleaning the workshop, stoking the forge under supervision, and fetching tools you don't yet recognize by name. Every mistake earns a barked reprimand, or, if the master's especially frustrated, a smack with the back of a soot-covered hand. But slowly, you learn, you begin to understand the hierarchy of tools, the difference between slag and usable iron, the rhythm of the bellows. You memorize the master's moods and learn to anticipate his needs, when to stay silent, when to ask questions, when to get out of the way. In your second year, you start basic tasks: cutting rods, drawing wire, making nails. Your blisters break and callus over. You begin to feel pride in tiny successes. When a nail head turns out just right, when the fire glows the exact shade your master prefers. By the fourth or fifth year, you're producing real work: hinges, brackets, horseshoes, under minimal supervision. The townspeople begin to greet you as more than just that boy from the forge. You are earning your place, but it's not all linear progress. One slip of the tongs, one misjudged tempering, and days of work can be ruined. Mistakes are not only frustrating, they're dangerous. A single distraction could cost you a finger or worse. At the end of your apprenticeship, often 7 years long, you must decide: will you remain here, working for the master as a journeyman, or will you travel, offering your services from village to village, saving coins to one day open your own forge? Journeymen lived hard lives, often sleeping in stables or on tavern floors, taking what work they could find and fighting for recognition. But those who succeeded, they became masters themselves, forging not just metal, but a life. So, yeah, if you thought the master's life was hard, remember that he once stood in your soot-caked shoes too. The gender question: women at the anvil. Now here's something Hollywood almost never shows: women in the forge. Despite common misconceptions, women were not absent from the world of medieval metalwork. While most master blacksmiths were men, thanks to guild restrictions, inheritance customs, and gender norms, many women worked in and around forges, especially in family-run operations. The wife of a blacksmith didn't just sweep the floor and serve stew. She often handled customer relations, kept mental tabs on credit and barter agreements, and occasionally operated tools when demand surged or help was scarce. Some learned to shoe horses, repair tools, and even forge simple items themselves. In cases where a husband died unexpectedly, widows sometimes took over the workshop entirely. Some guilds even made exceptions for widows, allowing them to continue the business under their own name for a limited time, especially if they had sons or apprentices to help with the heavy lifting. And in rare cases, women rose to full mastery, usually in regions with less restrictive guild policies, or in communities where practical needs outweighed gender norms. These women had to be twice as skilled to be taken half as seriously, but their work, when it survived, spoke volumes. Their names may be lost to history, but their hands shaped tools just as surely, and their sweat-stained aprons just as deeply. So, yeah, the forge wasn't exclusively a boys' club, and the next time someone tells you otherwise, remind them that history is written by survivors, not necessarily by those who did the work. The smell of iron, a sensory world. Let's talk about the smells. You might think the medieval forge is all smoke and fire, but no, friend, it's so much more complex than that. The scent profile of your daily life as a blacksmith is a cocktail of pungency that burns itself into your very soul. No perfume will mask it. No bath will erase it. First, there's the unmistakable stink of burning coal or charcoal, a sharp, throat-coating bitterness that hangs in the air, saturating your lungs and clothing. It smells like a campfire that's turned on you, a hot, dry, acrid wave that never fully dissipates, clinging to every fiber of your tunic and skin. Then there's the iron itself. Hot metal has a smell, believe it or not. It's hard to describe unless you've stood near it. Scorched, mineral sharpness, almost like blood and lightning combined. When iron glows red hot and then cools rapidly in the quenching tub, the rising steam carries a tang that's metallic and primal. It tickles your throat, stings your eyes. Add to that the wet stench of old water in the slack tub, a barrel that's seen too many days. Mold, ash, blood, oil, soot, all mingling into a murky soup that you sometimes have to plunge your arm into during emergencies. You tell yourself it's sanitary. You know it's not. And don't forget the human smells. Your sweat, your apprentice's sweat, the sourness of bodies, working 16-hour days beside an open fire. You stink all the time. Your feet, your hair, your hands, perpetually blackened and smelling of scorched skin and iron oxide. Sometimes there's meat roasting nearby, sometimes a bread crust left too long on the forge edge, and sometimes burnt hair, yours, your apprentice's, or some unlucky visitor who got too close to the workbench. This isn't just the smell of work, it's the smell of identity, of labor, of craft. The forge is a symphony of fire and metal, sure, but its perfume, that's something you carry with you, even into your dreams. Let's be honest, Fabreze wouldn't stand a chance when the forge goes cold. Illness and absence. But what happens when you can't work? When illness strikes, or worse, injury, your entire world grinds to a halt. The forge doesn't run itself. There's no out-of-office notice, no sick leave, no backup blacksmith a few doors down. When your fire dies, the entire village feels it. If you catch a fever, maybe from tainted well water, or just the fatigue of overwork, everything backs up. The Reeves nails sit unfinished. The carpenter's hinge commission is delayed. The baker still needs her oven door latch repaired. The farm tools rust while you lay sweating, too weak to lift your own cup of water. And let's not forget the mental toll. Lying there in bed, staring at the ceiling, you don't just worry about recovery. You panic about being forgotten, about losing favor, about someone younger and stronger showing up from another town, offering lower prices and fewer coughs. If your illness stretches into weeks, your wife becomes your business manager, your apprentice struggles to keep up, and barter debts begin to mount. That promise of 2 loaves for a scythe blade repair? Delayed. That tax payment, due in coin? Unforgiving. There's no mercy in medieval labor. You either show up or get replaced. Your hammer waits patiently, but your customers don't. And when you finally drag yourself back to the forge, weakened and behind on orders, it feels like starting from zero. Your body stumbles, your hands shake, your backlog taunts you from every corner. So yeah, next time you're curled up with a cold in your modern bed, watching Netflix, Remember, a medieval blacksmith's sick day might mean hunger, not just for him, but for the entire village. The unwritten rules, ethics of the forge. Even in an age before formalized business, ethics or corporate codes of conduct, your trade as a medieval blacksmith was governed by a surprisingly complex web of unwritten moral expectations. These ethical norms weren't etched into law, but were deeply felt, passed through generations of craftsmen like the techniques themselves. First and foremost was the expectation of honesty in your materials. Passing off a brittle, poorly tempered blade as battle ready could mean death for a soldier in the field. Using inferior iron in farming tools might doom an entire harvest. You knew that cutting corners with materials could have consequences far beyond mere reputation. In a world where survival teetered on the edge of functionality, the reliability of your work could quite literally be a matter of life or death. Then there was pricing. Sure, you could overcharge the widow who needed a cooking hook, or the sick farmer who required a new hoe blade. But the village would remember, reputation wasn't about marketing slogans. It was your only currency. One act of greed or deception could ripple through the community for months, even years. You didn't just serve a customer, you maintained a social contract, and when something you made broke, if it failed prematurely or due to your own oversight, it wasn't uncommon to fix or replace it for free. You didn't have a formal warranty policy, but your sense of professional pride demanded accountability. Not to mention, having to walk past your own defective craftsmanship every day in a village with no anonymity was a daily humiliation you tried to avoid at all costs. There were also ethical lines you tried not to cross when it came to commissions. Making weapons was part of your job, sure, but when a known troublemaker asked you to forge a dagger with suspicious urgency, or a rival lord's servant came seeking armor late at night, you were forced into uncomfortable moral calculations. Refuse, and you risked angering powerful people. Accept, and you might arm someone who'd later return to harm your own community. You walked a tightrope. Every piece you crafted had implications beyond the workshop walls, and the older you got, the more you understood the weight of every hammer blow, not just in the metal, but in the lives around you. So yeah, you weren't just a tradesman. You were an unspoken guardian of community trust. The apprentice's path from boy to blacksmith. Now, let's shift perspective for a moment. Imagine you're not the master in the forge, but the boy in the corner, the apprentice. Barely a teenager, barely educated, and certainly not prepared for the grueling path ahead. Your hands are soft, your back unused to labor, and your mind still half in childhood. But your family can't afford to feed all their children, and this apprenticeship is your ticket to survival, maybe even eventual independence. Your first year is mostly humiliation. You're tasked with cleaning the workshop, stoking the forge under supervision, and fetching tools you don't yet recognize by name. Every mistake earns a barked reprimand, or, if the master's especially frustrated, a smack with the back of a soot-covered hand, but slowly you learn. You begin to understand the hierarchy of tools, the difference between slag and usable iron, the rhythm of the bellows. You memorize the master's moods and learn to anticipate his needs, when to stay silent, when to ask questions, when to get out of the way. In your second year, you start basic tasks, cutting rods, drawing wire, making nails. Your blisters break and callus over. You begin to feel pride in tiny successes. When a nailhead turns out just right, when the fire glows the exact shade your master prefers. By the fourth or fifth year, you're producing real work, hinges, brackets, horseshoes, under minimal supervision. The townspeople begin to greet you as more than just that boy from the forge. You are earning your place. But it's not all linear progress. One slip of the tongs, one misjudged tempering, and days of work can be ruined. Mistakes are not only frustrating, they're dangerous. A single distraction could cost you a finger or worse. At the end of your apprenticeship, often 7 years long, you must decide, will you remain here, working for the master as a journeyman, or will you travel, offering your services from village to village, saving coins to one day open your own forge? Journeymen lived hard lives, often sleeping in stables or on tavern floors, taking what work they could find and fighting for recognition. But those who succeeded, they became masters themselves, forging not just metal, but a life. So, yeah, if you thought the master's life was hard, remember that he once stood in your soot-caked shoes too. The gender question. Women at the anvil. Now, here's something Hollywood almost never shows. Women in the forge. Despite common misconceptions, women were not absent from the world of medieval metalwork. While most master blacksmiths were men, thanks to guild restrictions, inheritance customs, and gender norms, many women worked in and around forges, especially in family-run operations. The wife of a blacksmith didn't just sweep the floor and serve stew. She often handled customer relations, kept mental tabs on credit and barter agreements, and occasionally operated tools when demand surged or help was scarce. Some learned to shoe horses, repair tools, and even forge simple items themselves. In cases where a husband died unexpectedly, widows sometimes took over the workshop entirely. Some guilds even made exceptions for widows, allowing them to continue the business under their own name for a limited time, especially if they had sons or apprentices to help with the heavy lifting. And in rare cases, women rose to full mastery, usually in regions with less restrictive guild policies or in communities where practical needs outweighed gender norms. These women had to be twice as skilled to be taken half as seriously, but their work, when it survived, spoke volumes. Their names may be lost to history, but their hands shaped tools just as surely, and their sweat-stained aprons just as deeply. So yeah, the forge wasn't exclusively a boys' club, and the next time someone tells you otherwise, remind them that history is written by survivors, not necessarily by those who did the work. The smell of iron, a sensory world. Let's talk about the smells. You might think the medieval forge is all smoke and fire, but no, friend, it's so much more complex than that. The scent profile of your daily life as a blacksmith is a cocktail of pungency that burns itself into your very soul. No perfume will mask it. No bath will erase it. First, there's the unmistakable stink of burning coal or charcoal, a sharp, throat-coating bitterness that hangs in the air, saturating your lungs and clothing. It smells like a campfire that's turned on you, a hot, dry, acrid wave that never fully dissipates, clinging to every fiber of your tunic and skin. Then there's the iron itself. Hot metal has a smell. Believe it or not, it's hard to describe unless you've stood near it. A scorched, mineral sharpness, almost like blood and lightning combined. When iron glows red hot and then cools rapidly in the quenching tub, the rising steam carries a tang that's metallic and primal. It tickles your throat, stings your eyes. Add to that the wet stench of old water in the slack tub, a barrel that's seen too many days. Mold, ash, blood, oil, soot, all mingling into a murky soup that you sometimes have to plunge your arm into during emergencies. You tell yourself it's sanitary. You know it's not, and don't forget the human smells. Your sweat, your apprentice's sweat, the sourness of bodies, working 16-hour days beside an open fire. You stink. All the time. Your feet, your hair, your hands, perpetually blackened and smelling of scorched skin and iron oxide. Sometimes there's meat roasting nearby. Sometimes a bread crust left too long on the forge edge. And sometimes burnt hair, yours, your apprentice's, or some unlucky visitor who got too close to the workbench. This isn't just the smell of work. It's the smell of identity, of labor, of craft. The forge is a symphony of fire and metal, sure, but it's perfume. That's something you carry with you, even into your dreams. Let's be honest, Fabreze wouldn't stand a chance when the forge goes cold. Illness and absence. But what happens when you can't work? When illness strikes, or worse, injury, your entire world grinds to a halt. The forge doesn't run itself. There's no out-of-office notice, no sick leave, no backup blacksmith a few doors down. When your fire dies, the entire village feels it. If you catch a fever, maybe from tainted well water, or just the fatigue of overwork, everything backs up. The Reeves nails sit unfinished. The carpenter's hinge commission is delayed. The baker still needs her oven door latch repaired. The farm tools rust, while you lay sweating, too weak to lift your own cup of water. And let's not forget the mental toll. Lying there in bed, staring at the ceiling, you don't just worry about recovery. You panic about being forgotten, about losing favor, about someone younger and stronger showing up from another town, offering lower prices and fewer coughs. If your illness stretches into weeks, your wife becomes your business manager. Your apprentice struggles to keep up, and barter debts begin to mount. That promise of 2 loaves for a scythe blade repair, delayed. That tax payment, due in coin, unforgiving. There's no mercy in medieval labor. You either show up or get replaced. Your hammer waits patiently, but your customers don't. And when you finally drag yourself back to the forge, weakened and behind on orders, it feels like starting from zero. Your body stumbles, your hands shake, your backlog taunts you from every corner. So yeah, Next time you're curled up with a cold in your modern bed watching Netflix, remember, a medieval blacksmith's sick day might mean hunger, not just for him, but for the entire village. The final test, passing the forge to the next generation. There comes a day, eventually, when the hammer feels heavier than it used to, when the forge's heat feels less invigorating and more suffocating, when the cough gets deeper, the hands slower, and the eyesight a little blurrier every dusk. That's when you start thinking seriously about succession. You've trained your apprentice, or maybe your son, for years. You've barked at him, corrected his hammer grip, made him redo a horseshoe 3 times until the curvature was perfect. You've watched him burn himself, scald his lungs on the forge smoke, and fumble with the tongs until the calluses finally grew in. But now, he's not just learning, he's performing. He lights the forge before you wake. He responds to clients with calm certainty. He makes decisions that you, in your pride, wouldn't have thought to make. But they work. You begin handing over more and more. First the basic jobs, then the specialized ones, and eventually the complex commissions from the manor house or church. You watch with a mix of pride and fear as he becomes. They start calling him the smith instead of the apprentice. It stings at first, like watching your own name fade from a ledger. But deep down, you know, that's the cycle. That's how you endured. And now, your legacy continues. You don't just leave behind tools or techniques. You leave behind a way of thinking, a way of working, a philosophy forged in iron and blood, now carried by a pair of younger, stronger arms. So yeah, when your hammer finally rests for the last time, it won't be forgotten. It'll echo in every swing that follows. The soundtrack of your life, rhythms of the hammer. If your life had a soundtrack, it wouldn't be music. It would be metal on metal. The ringing of your hammer against the anvil is so constant, so embedded into your daily existence, that you don't hear it anymore. Not really. It's like breathing, like your heartbeat. And for those who live around you, it's the sound that says, life is continuing. Each strike has a rhythm, a language of its own. The double tap of drawing out an edge, the slow, heavy thump of shaping thick iron, the rapid ping 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 of finishing touches on something delicate. Even your apprentice starts to recognize them. He can tell when you're frustrated, satisfied, or just plain exhausted based on the cadence alone. Outside your workshop, mothers hush their babies with the reassurance the smith is still working. Farmers time their breaks to the pauses in your rhythm. The distant ringing echoes through the village, bouncing off stone walls and thatched roofs like a metronome for medieval life. But this music comes with a cost. Your ears don't recover from decades of this acoustic punishment. Long before your back gives out, your hearing fades. Conversations become a guessing game. You read lips without realizing. You mishear names, instructions, even prayers at Mass. It's not just embarrassing, it's isolating. And let's not forget the tinnitus, that endless phantom ringing that follows you home, lingers in your dreams, and makes silence more painful than noise. Even in the dead of night, with the forge long cold and the anvil silent, the sound never truly leaves you. So, yeah, your life has a soundtrack. It's forged in iron and echoes in your bones. But like every part of the blacksmith's trade, you pay for it with pieces of yourself. The unseen war, competing crafts, and quiet rivalries. You'd think being the only blacksmith in the village makes you indispensable, and you are. But that doesn't mean you're free from competition. In fact, it's everywhere, just not the kind you'd expect. The carpenter, for instance, he needs your nails, hinges, brackets, but he also resents your pricing. He thinks you take too long. He sometimes tries to do metalwork himself, hammering together bent iron pieces with a levels of clumsiness that makes you wince. But to him, it's good enough. Then there's the traveling tinker. He strolls into town once a month with a cart full of cheap tools and flashy nonsense made from soft metal and promises. Villagers flock to him because his prices are low and his words are sweet. They don't realize his wares will break before the season changes. And when they do, who do they come crawling to? You. But by then, the damage is done. Your reputation, even if undeservedly tarnished, takes the hit. You become the grumbly alternative, the expensive one, until winter proves once again that your tools are the only ones that endure. You're also at odds with the mason. His work is large, visible, glorified in churches and castles. Yours is hidden, hinges behind doors, braces under beams. He gets the glory, you get the grime. Yet without your fastenings, his structures crumble. He knows it. You know it. But the Lords don't. And let's not forget the growing threat of imported goods. Traders from cities bring polished blades and cast pots made in bigger forges by dozens of men working shifts. Mass production, if you can call it that in the medieval world, undercuts your one-man operation. Villagers are tempted by the shine, the novelty, until it fails, until it rusts. Then they come back, quietly, embarrassed, holding a broken handle or a split seam, and you fix it, not because they deserve your help, but because that's your job, that's your code. So yeah, you're the only blacksmith in town, but you're never alone in the ring. The rivalries are subtle, unspoken, but always there, just like the heat in your forge, the fires of faith. When religion meets iron in your world, God is everywhere. And yes, even in the forge. Before you strike the first blow each morning, you mutter a quick prayer, maybe to Saint Eligius, patron of metalworkers, maybe just a whispered, Lord, keep my hands steady. You don't always think about it consciously, but it's habit now, like wiping your brow or checking your tongs. Faith isn't separate from your work. It's laced into every glowing ember. The church watches you closely too. You provide the ironwork for their doors, their candle holders, their bells, but more than that, you hold a certain mystique. Fire is sacred. Creation is divine. And what do you do every day? You summon fire. You shape raw elements into order. You mimic, in your own sweaty, battered way, the work of the Creator himself. Of course, this has a darker side. The villagers whisper about smiths, that you speak to the fire, that you know secret names of metals, that you might be able to heal or to curse. Some call you blessed, others, not so much, more than once. You've caught the side eye of an old woman muttering something about witch smoke as she passes your workshop. You walk a tightrope. Be too mysterious. And the priest raises questions. Be too humble. And the people lose respect. You have to be just the right amount of miraculous, enough to inspire awe, not fear. On feast days, you donate iron goods to the church, a new latch for the sacristy, a stand for the missal, a replacement cross for the cemetery gate. Not because you're devout, though maybe you are, but because in this world, faith and favor are currency just as real as silver. And when a storm rolls in and the lightning flashes, and someone remembers your forge caught fire once during a thunderclap, they'll say God was testing you, or blessing you, or warning you. Nobody agrees on which. So yeah, in a village ruled by weather and whim, faith seeps into everything, even into your soot-covered world of sparks and steel. And you, standing between the elements, arms blackened, face lit by forge light, sometimes wonder if that's why the anvil always rings like a bell. The unexpected clients. When nobility knocks, most of your customers are predictable. Farmers, priests, carpenters, cooks. You know their faces, their tools, their needs before they speak. But every so often, someone very different crosses your threshold. Nobility. It usually starts with a rustle outside your shop, fine boots stepping around puddles, a perfume so foreign it cuts through the forge smoke, then a knock, not the impatient bang of a villager, but a deliberate tap, like they're already judging your reaction. A noble's steward appears first. Of course, lords don't lower themselves to speak directly with tradesmen unless they have to. The steward looks around your workshop like it's a stable, trying not to wrinkle his nose. He carries a sword wrapped in velvet or a lockbox that needs urgent repair. This belongs to the Baron, he says, like that should make your hands work faster. You nod, say yes, my lord, and already begin calculating how many other jobs you'll have to delay to meet this unspoken deadline. Sometimes the job is simple. Reforging a decorative hilt, resizing a horseshoe for a prized warhorse, fitting armor so it doesn't pinch the knight's underarms. But other times they bring you a mess. A blade snapped because it was poorly tempered by some city smith. A ceremonial spear that must be reforged overnight for a feast. A chest lock that must be unpickable by tomorrow. And you do it, not because you want to, but because you must. Because when nobility knocks, they don't ask, they command. You never say no. Not really. You nod, you bow, you get to work, and if you do well, you might get a coin, maybe even two. You'll hear your name mentioned at the manor. You'll be that smith instead of that peasant, at least for a while. But don't expect protection. When the taxes come, they'll still take your silver. When your roof leaks, no noble will send a servant. The respect of the elite is fickle, conditional, temporary. So yeah, when they knock, you open the door, but you don't forget who you are. You're not their equal. You're the one who holds their world together, quietly, in the heat and the dark. And maybe, just maybe, that's the more powerful place to be. The forge, as inheritance, objects that outlive you. Some things you make will last longer than you. and you know it. You can feel it in the iron gate that swings silently even after 20 winters, in the lock whose key still turns with a whisper, in the plowshare that's been handed down twice already and only needs a little sharpening each spring. These objects become part of the landscape, not like trees or rivers, but like fixtures in the rhythm of life. And when someone asks, "Who made that?" the answer is often just, "The old smith." That's you. And no, they won't always remember your name. Sometimes your work will be attributed to your apprentice. Sometimes it'll be sold or traded or melted down into something new. But the form, the function, the thought, you shaped that. It was born under your hammer. You can't leave behind wealth. You don't have estates or titles, but you do leave behind iron in doorways, hinges on barns, loops for lanterns, grates in hearths. You leave behind function, permanence, evidence that someone once cared enough to do it right. In a world where things rot, rust, or get trampled into the dirt, that kind of endurance is its own kind of immortality. And maybe, just maybe, one of those pieces will inspire someone decades later, a young boy who notices the way two metal plates fit perfectly, a girl who asks how that iron scroll was curled so tightly. Maybe they'll ask questions, and maybe their father will say, "Oh, the old smith made it years ago, before you were born." That's the best you can hope for, to be remembered not by name, but by purpose, to have your hands echo in the everyday lives of people who never met you. So yeah, your tombstone might wear away, but the gate will still swing, the blade will still cut, the fire poker will still stir the coals, and that's legacy. The night before the fair, hope, hustle, and hidden fears. It's the night before the annual fair, the biggest event of the year, and while others sleep with dreams of music and mead, you're still in the workshop, sweating, swearing, and shaping the last batch of goods. Fairs are rare chances, a window into a different kind of life. For one day, your sleepy village becomes a market, a festival, a theater, and a battleground for artisans. And you get to show off, not just to your neighbors, but to merchants from far-off towns, to nobility, to potential patrons who actually carry coin. That's why you've spent the last week preparing like your life depends on it. Because, in some ways, it does. You forged finer hinges than usual, decorative knives with twisted handles, small trinkets like candle snuffers, and belt hooks that might catch the eye of someone wealthy. You've even polished your old anvil, mostly out of pride. But underneath the hope, there's fear. What if nothing sells? What if the imported goods from the city undercut you again? What if the Lord Steward inspects your work and sneers? So you double-check everything. Sharpen edges, oil moving parts, lay out the best items in a neat row, and wrap them in cloth. You even take a moment to pick out a cleaner tunic. Something presentable, something that doesn't smell entirely of smoke. Your wife prepares a basket of bread and cheese for the day. Your apprentice looks half asleep but excited. For him, it's a break from routine. For you, it's a test, because tomorrow isn't just about selling goods. It's about proving that your work matters, that in a world shifting toward big cities and mass production, a single smith in a smoky corner of the countryside still has a place. So, yeah, it's just a fair, but to you, it's everything. The day of the fair, metal meets the masses. The sun rises earlier than usual, or maybe it just feels that way because you barely slept. The village is already buzzing, carts rolling in, stalls being hammered together with the same nails you made last week. You carry your goods in a handcart, each piece wrapped carefully in cloth or straw. Your apprentice follows close behind, eyes wide at the colors, the noise, the chaos. Music plays from somewhere. The scent of spiced meat and baking bread dances through the air, briefly masking the familiar but just as hot. The last forge, when the fire finally fades, there comes a final morning. You don't know it's the last, at least not right away. You wake up slower, your legs ache in a new way. You sit on the edge of your bed, longer than usual, staring at your boots, wondering how many steps are left in them. You shuffle to the workshop, light the forge with practiced movements, but your hands feel foreign, your grip weaker, your breath shorter. The fire catches slower today, or maybe you do. Your apprentice, no, your journeyman now, arrives, cheerful, unaware. You grunt a greeting, hide the wince in your shoulder as you pass him the tongs. He doesn't need you anymore. Not really. He asks if you want him to handle the repair from the mill. You nod. He does it well. You offer a comment or two, out of habit, more than necessity. And then you realize your day is done. You've been replaced, not by force, not by shame, but by inevitability. You sit on the workbench, the same bench you built 30 years ago, the same one your own master used to sit on when he got too tired to stand. And now you're here. You watch your tools in someone else's hands. You hear your anvil ring with someone else's rhythm. You feel the warmth of the fire, but it no longer asks for you. It just glows. You don't cry. That's not your way, but you feel something hollow, crack quietly behind your ribs. Not grief, not regret, just ending. So, yeah, one day, the forge stops needing you, but it still remembers you. And that's enough. The anvil outlives you, echoes in iron long. After your hands go still, your anvil remains. It's not just a tool, it's a monument, a witness. It carries the memories of every strike, every mistake, every success. The face is worn, gently dished. In the middle, where thousands of blows have landed, the edges are chipped, where impatience cost you precision. The horn has lost its shine, but not its curve. You ran your life across that anvil, and now, your son, your apprentice, your successor takes your place before it. He sets his tools down on the same shelf. He feels the indentations your hammer left. He learns your rhythms, maybe even borrows your phrases. Not like that. Let the heat do the work. Hit with purpose. You're not there to say them anymore, but the shop remembers. The anvil remembers. The village remembers. A child passes the open door and says, That's where the old smith worked. A farmer holds a plowshare and says, "This is his work." Still sharp, a young apprentice runs his fingers over an old hammer and wonders what kind of hands held it. You're gone, but your anvil rings. Every time someone strikes it, you echo back, not in ghostly voices, but in lineage, in form, in tradition, in skill passed down through pain, patience, and fire. You didn't write books. You didn't sculpt marble. You didn't wear crowns. But you shaped the world one hinge, one blade, one nail at a time. And in this life, that's enough. Sleep now, smith. The forge is in good hands.